It was a gentle breeze that passed by. One might think it carried with it the untold secrets of the forbidden castle. It stood like a shadow among the trees, almost as if the trees themselves hesitated to reveal the place entirely, as if something there had come undone, something that was never meant to be seen. The thick mist could swallow any thought, any whisper that tried to escape the lips of those foolish enough to venture near. The scent of moss and damp earth lingered in the air like a specter. There was a silence that not only dominated, but weighed heavily, as if it bore the ancient sorrows of a troubled history. That moon, hidden behind elusive clouds, didn't truly illuminate. It merely suggested shadows that danced across its cold surface. There, time seemed suspended, like a distant echo of what once was, and yet the emptiness remained dense. Birds did not sing. There was no sound but a whisper of the wind, carrying echoes of forgotten stories, like a bell that once rang to mark a long-lost battle. They say those who dared approach the castle were never seen again. What could have happened to them? A mystery veiled by the trees, guarded beneath those cold and lifeless stones. The forbidden castle seemed to whisper to those who passed by, a subtle invitation to the dark side of knowledge. Something was not right, and it wasn't just the absence of voices. It was the weight of a raw truth, buried deep beneath gnarled roots and worn stones. Nature seemed to feel it too, as if the air were thick with nostalgia and mystery, waiting. Something, or someone, was about to emerge, tearing through the veil of this false normality. But what? The anticipation hung over the shoulders of those who passed, doubt dancing like leaves in a restless breeze. Words might die before being spoken, but the questions, the questions floated in the mist, lingering, waiting for someone to finally grasp them. Why did no one dare speak of what had been hidden there? The forbidden castle kept its secrets, and under the moon's fleeting light, only the earth's uneasy breath offered a reply. Another night, and you're still awake, traveler? Forgive me if I rushed into that greeting, but the nights sometimes seem to pass too quickly, like a dream that slips away from the mind before you can grasp it. I sat here by this crackling fire, which murmurs as if it knows more about me than I do. The warmth envelops my weary bones, but the weight of memory grows heavier, like armor that no longer fits my shoulders. The pain reminds me that yes, I am still alive. I remember a battle, or perhaps it was just a dream that wandered through my paths. There are fragments and echoes, lost murmurs in the shadows as I walked among them. I believe there was a worn map somewhere beneath the cold armor, the instructions for finding the truth, always hidden, as if they were treasures that no one wanted to face. Whenever someone crosses my mind, the figure that appears, it passes like a specter in the fog, crossing the damp ground silently. I wonder if perhaps there was someone there, or if it was all just a shadow of what I hold within. I felt more alone than ever. I hear the breeze reverberating like a distant bell, a whisper of buried truths that lie beyond reach. A distant laugh echoed nearby. I don't know where it came from, or where it was going. A laugh that contained the essence of a memory slipping through my fingers like sand. A commotion of sounds that we only notice when we close our eyes and let the past speak. That night felt paralyzed, filled with unspoken questions, as if they came from some distant place where there was no remembrance. I recalled the calm of the moment before the part that never happened, a deep silence filled with a cynical smile from time. And I, by the fire, listened to those echoes, those memories, while the flames illuminated a space that many had never noticed. Sometimes, out of the corner of my eye, I catch a glimpse of something moving, a reflection perhaps of a light dancing in the flames, the creature that watches with wavering eyes, as if it knows more about my past than I do. The mist around me weaves its lines, forming figures that come and go, faces I couldn't recognize. One curious detail: the ground beneath me is always damp, even without rain, like a mirror of the soul, where mud and tears intertwine. I can feel the truth in every step, but it slips away in the softness of silence. And as I gaze into the fire, I feel that in some way, I have left something behind. Something that seemed important, yet I never knew what it was. Time takes its turns, maintaining the same rhythm. The heat of the fire reminds me to breathe, but the echoes in my memory make me pause. The scene is no longer the same, and the fire repeats an old song that never goes out. The contained laughter echoes again, this time softer, as if an old friend wanted to remind me of something I already knew. I sense that even now, the presence of a forgotten past permeates everything. I wonder if it will ever make sense. Then, those imagined eyes watching us and this fog that refuses to dissipate. The story unfolds slowly, and the hearth of memory reveals its flames. Because even when everything dims, the warmth of a lost laugh can still guide us, if only we accept the freedom to let the burden go. In all the confusion and the distorted memories, there is a tenderness that still persists. The fire still burns with a persistent glow, and the memory of something that once was, or could have been, insists on living in a sleepy dance. Sometimes when I recall that emptiness, I feel that the truth among the shadows weighs more than any battle. So let the fire speak, through crackles and pops, in the hope that the mist of ancient memories may never fade away completely. The fallen arrows still seem to vibrate, memories echoing among the trees, a whisper I couldn't tell was mine, or the world. I saw them there. Invisible, tips framed in shadows, as if they held a purpose hidden beneath the forest's mist. They were not merely weapons, they were remnants of a struggle, and in this forgotten place the weapons of the dead were steeped in silence. The cold, it crawled through my veins, a persistent reminder of the despair contained in aimless arrows. The air was thick with a bittersweet aroma, sweat and blood mixed with the fresh decay of leaves. There I was, lost in fragments of a battle that wasn't mine, yet the pain felt like a dress that fit me awkwardly. Before me, a shadow moved among the leaves. It was a figure that reminded me of a lost companion, a forgotten face. However, I couldn't call out to him, as if his essence were subject to the same embargo I faced. What did it even mean? Perhaps that place didn't hide intertwined bonds, but rather echoes of our doubts, facets of a struggle we never fought. The memories argued among themselves, bringing forth questions that remained beyond reach. Why did it hurt so much if I had never been in the battle? The song of the struggle was like the melody of a lyre, a gentle touch that learned the pain and beauty of a distant conflict. And there, the arrows continued to vibrate beneath the dust that trickled down under the watchful gaze of the forest. Among the shadows, a sudden image sprang forth. I sensed the presence of a buried bell, an echo from the past that could never silence itself. The soft sound reverberated through the trees like a distant call. But what did it bring? They say you should never forget, I whispered to the breeze. But the wind only responded with diffuse murmurs, carrying away my confused echo. I remained in doubt, like a traveler walking while carrying his own ghosts. The questions were many, and the answers, those were still lurking somewhere. A closer look revealed an intriguing detail. There seemed to be a path of lost arrows leading to an invisible well among the roots. I smiled ironically at the thought that perhaps this well held not just water, but all memory. And what remains is the forgotten desire for connection. Even now, when I take a deep breath, I can hear something in the current of air. The song, the arrows, the shadow. Maybe it all happened, or maybe it was just my desire to linger among shadows and voices. But what truly mattered? And so, I began to navigate between confusion and affection. Even here, among the echoes, the arrows would remain, ready to tell their stories in ways they never knew how. I was left in doubt, and the mist around me thickened, guarding the secrets of a time that never came to fruition. The battle had never been fought, but its memories were there, waiting in a whisper of lost arrows, echoing amid the fog of a forgotten conflict. Sometimes when the wind blows from that direction, I hear a whisper, but I can't tell if it's real or just the murmur of the arrows that failed to find their target. The wind began to whisper secrets to the earth. It was a dusty road, so ancient that it seemed to breathe the echoes of those who had walked it before. Each step left a mark, not on the ground, but in the shadows of who we were and what we could have been. The sun, high like a weary guardian, rose, bringing a thread of hope, while the heat of the journey settled in, clinging to our skin like an embrace that wouldn't fade. There was a bittersweet taste of earth and unspoken things dancing on dry lips. I remembered friends who never existed, those who were more an echo of solitude than flesh and blood figures. The weight of absence deepened, like a subtle song practiced in the breeze, a call that never found its answer. In the distance, a stone rolled under the pressure of a distracted step, an independent event within a space creaking with distorted memory. I felt as if something was watching us, perhaps a shadow within me, or the very memories rising to the surface like confused specters trying to fit into a forgotten narrative. The road stretched in all directions, and as we moved forward, I wondered, where had I really been? Was it a decision or an impulse that brought us here? Each turn seemed like an abyss, a well of overwhelming uncertainties, and the horizon ahead transformed into a tangled fabric of choices that unraveled before they could be understood. A reflection in a mirror that doesn't reflect. It only suggests. There, a small creature stood at the edge of the road, a being wrapped in mist and mystery, with bright eyes that seemed to have seen more than they could bear. It was as if the earth itself pulled forth the voice of something forgotten. What if it never ended? I thought. It was there, an illustration of what I hadn't said, of what I didn't know how to let go. As I walked, the dust danced, forming small sunflowers of illusion around me, each one a symbol, a bridge between the past and something that might be destined to return. I looked down at the ground, where the footprints didn't just enter, but seemed to reverse. Sometimes the thought that we sanitized history arose like a fleeting relief. Could we, after all, choose what we wanted to forget? A soft sound cut through the serenity. It was a bell, hanging from a dry branch where it shouldn't have been. It tinkled like a lost echo refusing to cease. The music of the universe whispered, as if pleading for a forgotten memory. I recalled a ritual I never celebrated, a vague feeling that life flowed by like a calm river, but beneath the surface lay mountains. As the dust mingled with the heat, a fleeting vision teased me. There was something more, perhaps a truth stuck in the space where mist met day. And so I walked, lost in a daydream, close to what could be a shelter, or the opportunity to discover what I hadn't remembered was crucial. And when I closed my eyes, I realized it wasn't just the heat wrapping around my shoulders, but a softness of memories, rivers of the unknown intertwining, a sequence of intertwined destinies under the relentless sun of life. This could have been a home, or just a dream, unfolding in directions that could never be unraveled. The dust we raised along the journey formed outlines of images that, with each step, shattered into fragments, while the road continued to stretch, tireless and full of silent promises. Sometimes I think I left something inseparable behind on that road, but perhaps it was just a weary thought. The light of the sky was there, but it felt as if it were merely lost, floating among the mist. Beneath that blanket of stars, the darkness seemed to suspend them like vows whispered through eternity, and I searched for meaning in the constellations dancing to a silent rhythm, even though I didn't know how to dance. Sometimes, each star appeared to be an unfulfilled wish, a distant echo of an alternate me that I had never been. I remember gazing at that brilliant infinity while the cold wind whispered, almost as if it were trying to tell me secrets, bringing back softened memories. I entered a spiral of daydreams, wondering if I had ever promised something to someone under those same lights. The shadow behind me, perhaps the same shadow that had followed me throughout my life, echoed that doubt, as if it were there to remind me of unfulfilled promises. The silence was heavy, yet it lingered between us, like dry leaves carried along by the current of a deep river, times dragging everything that once mattered. And in the starry dance, there I was, a lost spectator, retreating a little further each time, confused in every attempt to decipher what was hiding among the constellations. This confusion, of course, was nothing new. I had repeated those empty moments before, on other nights, in other places. There was something in me that wondered. Who am I in the midst of all this empty space? A traveler who forgets his way, perhaps, or a type of memory that simply hasn't separated from its essence. Ah, the stars. A mystery to be unveiled, like the sound of bells lost in the mist. I never knew if they truly twinkled or if they merely reflected a faded wish. Even now, when the wind whispers, I feel that the story of the vows is merely a tapestry I've unraveled, or perhaps one that is also unraveling before me. But thus it continues, the warmth of the embers in the final inches of the camp. The melody of the wind flowed in cycles, bringing to mind a song I once heard among the trees. It was like a gentle kiss I didn't know how to return. I tried to regain a sense of meaning, but at the same time, I let the emptiness surround me, as if it knew something I didn't. A truth buried beneath layers of mist and forgotten history. Perhaps the pain wasn't in the echoes, but in the memories we chose to hide. That night, surrounded by the whiteness of the fog, I waited, and deep down, I knew that something was getting lost among the stars, as if a cycle was trying to complete itself. A call that no one answered, and with every breath, I questioned whether an answer would ever come to that longing. Perhaps the stars, which seemed to whisper the names of those who came before me, were waiting for that, for one more certainty, something to heal the broken vows between us and the distant horizon. And even while looking at that deep sky, there was still this question echoing. What had I forgotten to promise myself in that faded glow? And amidst all those constellations, maybe I could, once again, find the light that had slipped away. That memory of a me, slowly dissolving in the shadows of unfulfilled hopes, might not have been lost, but transformed. Thus, as I plunged into the silence, feeling the penetrating chill of the night air circling around me, I realized that behind those stars was the answer I sought. Or was it just an awaited invisible ending? a full moon confusing its own tracks. Sometimes, in the shadow of the night, even without recognizing it, I felt a connection to each distant glimmer. For a moment, the emptiness and confusion became an embrace, and I realized that the flow of time, the cycle of promises, twirled in a universe that encoded life itself. Even today, when the wind blows with a soft whisper, I hear something, but I always find myself wondering if it's real, or just a lost echo among whispered vows and forgotten stars. The furtive movement among the trees was almost imperceptible. Or perhaps it was just an illusion dancing in the darkness. The creature appeared and disappeared within the thick mist, almost like a solidified sigh, and its eyes glowed with a light that wasn't of this world, like unconsumed brown flames flickering in the fog. The atmosphere pulsed with the scent of damp earth, infused with the presence of something that seemed to live and breathe, waiting for a moment that never came. There the forest throbbed with life, as if every leaf and root knew more than I did, wrapped in the heavy secret they protected so fiercely. I could still feel the echo of that strange yet familiar presence. It was a mix of curiosity and fear that drew me closer, like a traveler captivated by a mystery disguised in fading light. I followed the movement in that vibrant twilight, and for the first time, a sense of hope seeped into my soul, even intertwined with doubt. Was it the bearer of some forgotten truth, or merely a fragile illusion, a trick of my weary mind? Thoughts became sprays, boiling like water, bubbling up, pulsing to surface, yet always dodging a clear revelation. As I faced the creature more closely, I realized that in a way, it reflected the darkness contained within me, a fragment of my own soul that I could neither embrace nor fully understand. It was a dance between relief and fear that I lived with every breath, like a silent struggle, a bumpy ascent in search of understanding. The desire to comprehend was a subtle clash, like tiny mushrooms sprouting among the roots. As the echo of magic and mist formed a backdrop, whispers contained in the leaves and a distant echo of twisted winds seemed to murmur secrets that would never be revealed. Maybe it never even happened, I thought, as feelings swayed like branches in a calm storm. Sensations swelled, laden with both weight and lightness in a melancholic perplexity. Under the gaze of that creature, I questioned my own reasons and dark paths. What mysteries did it hold? What was it trying to tell me? Today, when I remember, those bright eyes become ancient echoes, blurry images dancing in the fog. But I don't hear screams, only the resonance of silence in each imperfection, beyond explanation. There was something disconcerting about its presence, as if it were not made of flesh and bone, but of shadows and murmurs. Each subtle movement created an underlying anticipation, a warning that some secret was entwined within that forest, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. And as the mist began to dissipate, a new feeling blossomed within me, like a mirror reflecting what everyone avoided. For a brief moment, those eyes were not strangers. They were familiar, like an old song hanging in the air. Who was the creature among the shadows? Was it the result of a memory, an echo of the voices that murmured within me, or simply the manifestation of a hidden desire for connection, whispering truths that hid in the crevices of time? Faced with the mystery that lingered in the air, the fog seemed to wait, just like I did, for the answer to a question that hovered, undefined, between the echoes of memory and unspoken silences. Or perhaps in the end, everything was just a reflection of what resides within us, a search for tangled meanings that never find closure. Sometimes I feel I left something very important behind, something that the creature and the forest know deeply, but that remains a subtle whisper, almost undetectable. And even now, when the breeze blows from the north, I still hear something. But I don't know if it's real, or if it's just the fog wrapping me in its old stories. It was there, or perhaps it was just a lost fragment wandering in my memory, like a shadow, almost visible at dawn. In the deepest corners of my being, an unsent letter nestled, its dusty traces covered by nostalgia and promises that would never come to life. The paper, yellowed by time, exuded a scent of nostalgia, a murmuring reminder of feelings I couldn't release, lost among the silent gaps of a life that never found its way. Ah, the words echoed under the restless breezes, dancing among the crooked trees, as if they wanted to escape the lips that never spoke them. This made me remember the smell of lavender, a scent I always associated with those memories of youth, abandoned beneath a cloudy sky. And with every gust of wind, it seemed the past was trying to call to me, gently touching my spirit with reminders of an unfulfilled affection, like a distant melody of a song that never ended. The letters I never wrote danced in my mind, forming a silent chorus of unexchanged glances, of gestures left unmade. Constrained by the absence of dialogue, all that remained were echoes of an unlived joy. A shadow danced around me, provocative and capricious, as if it were my own hesitation, the desire to remember the bonds I let slip away, the goodbyes that were never said. There was laughter, a hidden laugh, reverberating somewhere in the forest, asking about the promises I made to myself, or perhaps challenging the idea that I would ever gather the courage to fulfill them. And there, in that space of introspection, I realized that absence was an indifferent companion. The emptiness, despite everything, was frequent and constant, becoming part of the life I had accepted. It was a state of unsettling peace, as if the entire camp were tuned into a frequency of forgetting and remembering, balancing the thin line between what could have been and what truly was. Even the shadows seemed to hesitate in their movement, as if they too were waiting for some kind of revelation. Maybe it never even happened? I asked myself several times as the firelight illuminated the landscapes of a sleepy confusion. The words of the letter, those disembodied letters, swirled in my mind like yellowed cards from a deck that would never be played. A symbol, perhaps, of what kept me there, holding my secrets and desires like a black ribbon silently floating in the fog. When I closed my eyes, a familiar melody crossed my being, blending with the mist around me. It was as if those unspoken feelings were forming in the haze, almost as if they danced among the echoes of unrecorded murmurs. Would I ever truly feel the weight of that letter in my hands, or would it remain lost on the fringes of my memory, an unattainable specter gazing at me from afar? And even now, when the wind blows between the tents of the camp, I hear something. Perhaps it is the murmur of a word I never pronounced, yet it still sings in some distant tune, the hope that one day I will find the courage to send the letter that was never written. Promises vibrated in every breath. In that place, where time seemed to float like a weightless shadow, I caught a glimpse of the worshippers of lost dreams. They were nebulous figures, more subtle than the very air, as if every unfulfilled desire could come to life under the soft glow of the mist. Their faces shimmered. Their eyes, lost fragments of memories so distant, seemed to carry echoes of forgotten promises woven throughout the thick haze. It was an almost sad dance, a silent ballet of unmet hopes. As I drew closer to them, I noticed each figure spoke in whispers, yet there were no words. The sounds were made of unspoken feelings, a murmur that blended with the scent of dried flowers, still insisting on living. That aroma brought forth laughter that never became echoes, memories of parties that never happened, or perhaps just remnants of laughter that ended without closure. The air pulsed with a sense of loss, as if each breath was interrupted, caught in an eternal almost. What intrigued me was the idea that they were in some way fragments of myself, vestiges of a me I wanted to forget or remember fondly. A melancholic desire blossomed in my chest as I realized that what I sought around me was merely a yearning to free myself from that bitter past. Why was I tethered to what never was? The answer danced around me, but it remained cloaked in mist. The connection between my dreams and reality stirred. I had become a garden of wilted flowers, crying out to be seen, yet invisible to my own eyes. The worshippers, with their vaguely defined shapes, moved in a space that oscillated between light and shadow. There was something surreal about them, almost as if, when I looked at them, I recognized a familiar object I couldn't name. A bell, perhaps, or a bird that had forgotten how to fly. Each of the figures concealed a shared truth, and soon I realized there was a symphony made of lost laughter and unwept tears, reverberating in every corner of that ethereal space. I felt my heart pulse to the beat of that melody, a small reunion with what had been lost. Yet, a doubt troubled my mind. Those who danced in the mist, the worshippers of unrealized dreams, were they echoes of an unlived reality, or were they simply reflections of my deepest yearnings, like mirrors in an endless corridor, reflecting what would never be true? Sometimes I think I forgot something there, but perhaps it's just a weary thought, an impulse to want something that is no longer mine. And even now, as my gaze wandered among the shadows, I recognized a familiar echo, a memory of a smile I had never known, yet felt close, as if it had dwelled beneath the same skin. Amidst that sleepy dance of promises and hopes, I found a symbol, hidden beneath the veil of the endless. I placed my hand on something soft. It was a black ribbon, a reminder of who I once was. Wherever I went, the ribbon always appeared. An uninvited guest that didn't know how to say goodbye, carried along by the fog of days. And there it is, the melody that never ends, the song without a refrain that always returns. A note echoing just at the right moment, like a tick-tock that never tires of sounding. A little mystery, almost like a disguised curiosity. Who were they, after all? Who am I there, dancing among the worshippers of my sunlit and external memories? I still dream that if I ever manage to free those lost dreams, perhaps I will find the courage to reconnect with what I left behind. But that connection, that desire to be reborn, is always caught between a whisper and a lament, between an embrace and a farewell. Because at the end of the day, who are we if not the guardians of our own desires, tethered to the souls that once belonged to us, yet have never ceased to exist? And now, when I remember that day, I feel that the echo of the black ribbon returns to my thoughts. But the memory, maybe it never faded. Perhaps I am still here, among the worshippers of lost dreams, dancing with what never had the chance to flourish. It was a day like any other. Or maybe it wasn't. The still water of the lake returned altered images to me. There, around it, the silence seemed to wait, as if the world had paused just to observe me. The lake's surface was a mirror that didn't reflect what it was, but rather what it could have been. The outlines of my thoughts, distorted beneath the gentle rippling stirred by the shy wind. It was a chill that penetrated to the core, as if it sought to go beyond the skin, searching for forgotten memories that lived solely in the echoes of my being. The scent of damp earth filled the air as I touched the surface, feeling the contrast of the cold water against the warmth carried in my memory. There, the waves, now gentle, rocked delicate memories, and all seemed to whisper something, murmurs that sketched faces I recognized, but that weren't meant for me. With each ripple, a life not lived rebounded against my consciousness, as if the lake were trying to tell me secrets I had long lost. Who was I, after all, in the face of all this? I remember catching sight of a fish, or what seemed to be one. No, it wasn't a fish. It was a shadow swimming among the reflections, tracing the memories as if it knew what I couldn't grasp. Each glance into the depths revealed a new vision, and with each new vision, a new doubt. What was I truly seeking? Those waters were an echo, an invitation, or were they merely a reflection of my uncertainties? The cold enveloped me, making every fiber of my being pulse. It was beautiful, yes, that enchantment, woven in doubt. But the comfort I felt morphed into an uneasy state, as if the tranquility itself weren't mine, but a disguise for what I genuinely wanted to discover. Would the realization of a future be merely a distant echo, a confirmation that I had always remained absent in my own journey? I lost a moment in the touch of the water, in the texture of what was liquid and yet profoundly solid in my memories. And then, a circle formed on the surface, as if the lake itself accepted a pain or a wish. Sometimes it is that simple. What moves leaves its marks. Even now, at times, I feel like I left something there, hidden beneath the mist of those waters, something that never revealed itself, but vibrates beneath the surface, cloaked in memories that weave through the threads of the past. With every bubble that burst, a muffled laugh reached me, a shadow playing, like a mischievous memory, slipping between lost smiles and unlived possibilities. Once, I saw the flowers on the shore leaning strangely, as if stretching their necks in search of the light that never arrived. They were like curious eyes, attentive to what might happen, yet it never became real. But who could say it wasn't real? Maybe it never even happened. Everything became a maze of reflections, and in the center, the lake continued to shimmer, holding secrets within. I then plunged into the thought that what I sought might lie beyond the reflection, beyond the play of light. Perhaps all this time I was merely excavating myself on a quest that would lead me nowhere, but which in its pain showed me the beauty of remaining in a reflective existence. And so, I lingered, lost between the lake and the sky, between what we call the present and what never reveals itself. Ah, traveler, the waters of the lake held secrets that filtered the essence of who we were, or perhaps of who we never allowed ourselves to be. Even today, when the breeze blows in that corner of the world, I hear the call of something profound, something that stirs in the hidden currents between reflections. I feel I left something behind in that water, but I never knew what. It was there, or perhaps it was just a memory trying to walk. An extinguished lighthouse, solemn on the horizon, its ruins standing tall like a silent oracle of the tides and lost soul. I often wonder, traveler, how many weary sailors found comfort in that radiant glow, that enticing warmth, which has now faded into fading memories that caress time. The wind whistled, bringing echoes of forgotten adventures, while the aroma of unfinished smoke wrapped around me like a familiar, though unwelcoming, cloak. There I stood, facing the darkened lighthouse, a memory that I didn't know if it was breaking apart in pain or nostalgia. The island didn't move, but it seemed to draw closer to me, making me question if the extinguished could one day become light again. But, staring fixedly at the past leaves us so tentative, doesn't it? An extinguished lighthouse is not only a symbol of the absence of light, but also of the loss of a possibility, of the unknown, of what could have been. I gazed at the sea, where the waves broke like loose notes of a forgotten song. Almost visible promises floated in the foam, but as I searched for them, all I found were remnants of a distant echo, a whisper, a doubt. What did that lighthouse keep? What could each broken stone and every flower blooming in the cracks of its structure convey? I remember speaking about lighthouses in a smoke-filled tavern during my childhood, about beacons of hope. But what did I guide behind me in my mind? An ancient scent mixed with mud, surely something wounded, something that could have shone again. The doubt consumed me. Why did I let that flame go out? Did it go out in me as well? Or did I simply lack the courage to rekindle it? And there stood the lighthouse, with its mute history, rising like a staff against something unresolved. Sometimes when I close my eyes, the sound of a bell seems to float in the mist. It's almost as if the lighthouse wanted to remember its essence, echoing an ancient melody that stirred only at the edges of my consciousness. But its sound doesn't bring comfort, merely a continuous echo of something that must remain dormant. After all, there are truths that go unrevealed, and sometimes we anxiously hope for the mist to clear. A part of me struggled to draw closer, to touch the cold stone and feel the presence of those who had passed there before, or who might have passed, creating invisible paths. A whisper from the breeze dared me to try. What's so terrifying about rekindling the light of what has been lost? What shadows inhabit the distance where the lights no longer dance? Even now I can hear voices I don't recognize, mingled with the waves and the wind, as if they were waiting for someone to reclaim the light. And there, between the fog and the half-alive memories, I understood. Maybe it never even happened, you know. A lapse, a fraction of all that I am. As time passed, I realized that my quest wasn't about having the audacity to reignite the lighthouse's light, but rather understanding that the light would merely be a reflection of myself, a distant echo hovering between what I've covered and what I hesitated to remember. The night was cold, the rhythmic sound of the sea echoed like an invitation, a lullaby of times that didn't last. I allowed myself to linger there, wrapped in the mists of what could have been, even as my body yearned to leave. In that moment, I grasped the essence of all things that faded away without premeditated warning. And even now, upon my return, I still feel that the lighthouse continues to exist, even if its light is lost in the shadows of memory. I took one last look at the horizon. The sea remained steadfast. The lighthouse stood. It lost its light, but never the space it occupied. And so, as I left behind that moment of confused introspection, I felt deep in my heart that the light could be reignited. Or perhaps, in the end, the lighthouse was simply waiting for me, like a destiny that would never fade, even in the darkest of memories. And now, when the breeze blows, I hear the song of the distant lighthouse, a melody that insists on living among echoes that have never left, bubbling among those fortunate enough to hear what remains, even if just by a thread. It was there. Or perhaps it was just the pressure of a past that insisted on not being silenced. The armor I wore, heavy, shimmered in the flickering light of the campfire, reflecting shadows that danced on the walls of the camp, like echoes of battles that were never fought. Each piece, each link of metal around me felt like an extension of memories, every scar pulsing with a story, forgotten like leaves that fall in autumn. The days blended into a tangle of memories and absences. There was a hint of blood, not mine, but from the brothers in arms who ventured in the devastated fields my heart refuses to draw. It was a metallic perfume that emerged at unexpected moments, like a wandering memory that refused to be ignored. I asked myself once again if all of this really happened, or if the memories were merely the fabrications of a mind so tired that it could barely distinguish dream from reality. With every step I took, there was a weight, an invisible shackle that pulled me back to a place where pain hid, along with faces that bore laughter and tears. The armor wasn't merely protection, it had become my prison, a place of safety and also of solitude. The sensation of the cold metal against my skin felt like a tight embrace, reminding me of the battles I didn't have the courage to face and the truths I would avoid confessing in the light. The creaking of the steel pierced the silence in the void, making me feel like a specter, wandering without purpose. Once, in the silence of the night, when the only sound was the gentle whisper of the wind, someone approached me. It was a figure shrouded in shadow, whose eyes shone with an intensity I'll never forget. He didn't say much, just commented on how armor shapes who we are, but it can also make us forget. An ambiguous statement. Whoever is trapped in the past never discovers if they're really alive. That weighed heavily, like a whispered truth I didn't want to believe. The marks on my hands told their own stories, some scars blurred by time, and the dissonance of echoes from lost battles. I wondered if each scar was a warning, a visible reminder of what had taught me, or an attempt by the past to capture me in an endless cycle. While others moved on, I seemed to stagnate, like a fog that wouldn't dissipate. Then I heard a noise, a distant bell, an echo repeating at irregular intervals, as if the camp itself were trying to remember something forgotten. The bell of the armor in which I took refuge, or a warning that there were still storms to face. We might be physically here, but my spirit seemed to wander in a deeper abyss. Some people used to say that in the silence of the night, you could hear the sounds of memories coming from places we could no longer access. The old blacksmith's forge, the hum around the fire that we didn't bother to replace. And even now, under the mists of solitude, the armor echoed back, as if whispering, "Remember, remember who you were." Within, it lay the marks of an artist who never settled, of a musician playing a melody that slipped through fingers. The certainty that there was clay filled with untold stories brought me a new perspective, and I realized it might be time for all of this to find the peace it lacked. In the solitude of the battle that was not yet ahead, I learned that my armor, despite its weight, could still be a pathway to understand. Who knows? Perhaps the weight I carry teaches me to walk over uncertainty like a ritual. As I watched the fire glow and extinguish, the embers in their final dances seemed like a near revelation, like whispered promises that, within silence and mist, the path wasn't yet lost. And even now, when the wind blows from that direction, I hear something. But I'm not sure if it's real. It was there. Or perhaps it was just a memory carried by the wind. The ruins of the temple loomed like broken teeth of a sleeping giant, marking the horizon, and in its deafening silence, I felt the absence of something that once pulsed there. Where were those bells that once rang in celebrations? Now, they were just shadows of the past, forgotten amidst the dust dancing in the air. The scent of incense enveloped everything, mingling with the weight of time, in a breath that seemed to carry echoes of laughter and promises long gone. There at the center, that moss-covered stone crown exuded a lament. I could hear its silent prayers, as if each block of stone had a story to tell. But the joy had faded, leaving only a washed-out echo where expectation had died. I stood still, my feet planted on the ancient ground, wondering how it had been the last time those bells had rung. A lost moment, perhaps, in the chaos of war or the tedium of festivities. What does it matter now? The only certainty was the emptiness enveloping us like a tattered blanket, and with it, the understanding that what remained were mere fragments, lifeless echoes. In the silence, the memories were an exposed nerve, an open wound in each of us. The sounds of the temple, the lost laughter in this ghostly camp had become unfulfilled promises. What could memory bring me? Besides fragmented glimpses of smiles that now felt heavier than any torment. With the aridity of the environment surrounding me, a presence enveloping me, I wondered if there was really any sense in that time-worn structure. As I gazed, a movement caught my eye. The shadows shifted under the swift light of twilight. A creature moved among the stones, resembling a bird that didn't fly, but dragged itself along the ground, as if it were searching for something. Or perhaps something it had lost. As I approached, the creature disappeared into the darkness, leaving only a whisper of doubt in the air. What was it seeking? A name? A forgotten story? A truth buried beneath centuries of silence? When I closed my eyes, I could feel the coldness of the stone against my skin. The loneliness filled more than anyone could admit. I recalled the voice of an old sage in a distant dream. Maybe the truth never needs to be revealed, but it always makes itself felt. And with that, the doubt pulsed like a second heart. Perhaps all of it had been merely an invention of my weariness. The bells, the smiles, the promises, all discarded to the ether, where echoes are lost and nothing reverberates. As the crackling of the fire grew in the shadows, each pop seemed like one of the laughs that once existed there. The blind witches danced with time in every breath of space, echoing once again in our ears. Even now, I feel I left something there. But what could it be but a desire for everything I did not experience? The foot of the mountain watched me, silent, and together we hold those echoes, as if they were imperceptible whispers of a past that refuses to reappear. Even today, when the wind blows from that direction, I hear something, but I don't know if it's real, or just another shadow among the temple's ruins that, at some point, once reverberated with celebrations, just like the bells that now ring no more. Section 13. Walking among the lost. The mist coiled around my feet. Or perhaps it was I who was losing myself. As I walked, I let souls slip away like leaves carried by the wind, gliding in the half-light of a world I almost recognized. And my steps were slow, as if time itself hesitated to move forward. I felt the presence of shadows, figures gliding beside me, like echoes of unlived lives, murmurs interrupted by my tired thoughts. I was swept away by their stories flourishing in the breeze, flowers I had never seen, but whose scents strangely resonated within me. The mix of the odor of wilted flowers and parched earth melded with the sorrow of each step I took, as if this landscape wished to warn me about the fragility of every moment. And there was a darkness there, a heavy sadness, a fog that gathered in the shadows as I sought answers to questions that were never asked. Each of those lost souls seemed to recognize a piece of my being, and looking at them, a truth emerged. Perhaps we were all simply echoes of a collective dream that never had the chance to materialize. My memories drifted with distant whispers, bubbles of memories that danced too far away, as if they were on the verge of vanishing. Amidst this, I wondered, perhaps life is no more than a tapestry of fragments, a universe of scattered feelings, pleading for attention. My gaze wandered among the forgotten figures, revealing a little of our human frailty with each passing moment. A woman faded among the trunks. Her presence was almost palpable, but when I reached out, she vanished like smoke in daylight, and with every step, the whisper of her echoes grew stronger, as if an ancestral song tried to make itself heard through time. The feeling was so familiar, as if we had always been together, dancing in the same shadows, escaping truths we could feel but never touch. And in the midst of this sense of togetherness, I recognized a symbol, a bell, hanging from a twisted tree, almost invisible, yet swaying gently in the breeze. A sound that came and went, as if it were telling stories that no one paid attention to. It was always there when I sought answers, but I never noticed it. Maybe I forgot about it. I thought, dismayed by my ingratitude for not having seen it before. As I walked, I realized that my steps intertwined with the mist, as if I were being guided by something silent. Or perhaps it was a longing for something I barely understood. It was as if our memories were stitched together, under the same tenuous execution, yet tangled in a mystery that united us, now as filaments of sap in the shade of an ancient tree. The whispers now seemed to form a song, a gentle melody that stood apart from the empty frustration. It was a soundtrack composed by those we don't know, but who have always been among us. At some point, I lost track of space and time. A moment turned into prolonged voids, and so I merely floated through that strange landscape, offering me an illogical sense of comfort, like the warmth of a fire that never burned. Yet behind that softness, there was a sharp sense of falling, as if each note of the song was on the verge of disintegrating. Suddenly a thought struck me, like lightning through darkness. Maybe all of this had happened before. An almost revelation that encouraged me to take a closer look at the shadows surrounding me, the tent floating ahead of me. Or was it just the fog deceiving me? I continued walking among the lost, looking beyond the invisible walls, constantly questioning if they too were echoes of my own daydreams. And as the silence told its stories in a symphony of the unspoken, I realized that perhaps we were all, in the end, caught in an inescapable cycle of hope, nostalgia, and fragments of memories that refused to fade away. And even now, when the wind blows from that direction, I hear something, but I don't know if it's real. At first, it was just a sound, low, damp, like the breathing of a beast, asleep beneath the earth. A kind of indistinct murmur that blended with the crackling of embers and the creaking of tents. Some said it was just the wind dragging between the trunks. Others claimed it was the wood groaning under the weight of the mist that seemed to have a life of its own. But on a very quiet night, one of those when even the fog seems to hesitate, I looked down at the ground and heard my name. Not in a loud voice, not as a call. It was a whisper, coming from the ground, from the damp mud forgotten at the side of my bed of dry leaves. I swallowed hard. I felt the chill of the early morning cut through me, and as my heart raced, I waited. There it came again. My name, dragged out as if spoken by someone who had never quite learned to speak properly, but who knew me. Oh yes, knew me well. The next day, I spoke to the others. I heard my name in the mud, I said, almost confessional. Most laughed. Some said it was just sleep, but 2 others had also heard it. One of them, a man with perpetually half-open eyes, claimed that the mud called all of us from time to time, that it knew our footprints, that it remembered the steps taken in vain. We all looked down at our feet, covered in mud, which seemed like timeless times in constant transformation. From that moment on, I began to notice. On the wetter, muddier days, and in the darkest corners of the camp, the mud began to bubble. Small bubbles rose, bursting slowly, and in the burst names. Not complete, not clear, but fragments, syllables laden with the past, as if ancient tales tried to escape through the surface of the earth. Once, I heard a name that made me shudder. It was the name of a friend, one I hadn't seen since before the camp. I thought he was dead, or that he had never existed, and the next day, I saw a man with the same eyes sitting near the fire. But he didn't recognize me. His voice was like mud. He no longer remembered how to fly. An old man suggested that the earth was made of us, that our forgettings trickled down into it, and now and then it returned a piece to us, in name, in image, in dream, a memory woven with red eyes and faded smiles. A child appeared, a child who carried a universe in his gaze and drew in the mud with his fingers. Words emerged behind the strokes, names of people no one knew, or pretended not to know. When he finished, the mud covered the drawings like a tongue, licking its teeth, the grace dissipating in the moisture of the moment. In another fragment of that memory, someone dropped an iron spoon into the earth. It sank, disappeared. In its place, a small puddle formed, and from there, a whisper rose. Don't come back. 3 days later, that person left. We never saw him again. The earth seemed born of pain, with an insatiable thirst. The tailor, one early morning, stood for hours before a smooth patch of mud. He claimed to hear ancient songs from when the war was still young. After that, he began to sew with his eyes closed, whispering the secrets we didn't dare to touch. An intriguing detail. Where the mud whispered, the ground felt colder, as if what spoke didn't come from beneath the earth, but from a time far earlier than ours. A familiar echo that turned into memory, but never became clear. One morning, the biggest tent was surrounded by footprints. They came from all directions, like fingers trying to touch its edge. But there were no marks leading away. And in the center, a clean circle. Inside it, a phrase written in dark earth. To remember hurts. I remember this as if the writing were the only answer that silence could give. Some tried to cover the whispers. They tossed leaves, stones, even salt. But it was pointless. What the mud wanted to say, it said, always in its own time, and always with its own cycle of memory. So, on a particularly cold night, I heard my name again. But this time, alongside another. A name that hadn't been heard in decades, or centuries. A name that made me tremble. It was a woman's name, or perhaps my own being in another life not lived. You know, traveler. Sometimes I wonder if all of that really happened, or if the mud was what remained of the collective memory, a bank of forgotten names trying with effort to remind us who we were before we became afraid to know. As I walk on soaked ground, I bow my head. I listen, because I know the earth, at some point, is still calling me, and that there are names that should never have been buried. The wind whispered through the trees, as if it carried an anti-fragile echo of the unspoken words. There, in the heart of the camp, the darkness seemed deaf to broken promises, a silenced cry to the wind. I found myself surrounded by shadows dancing just beyond the reach of the light, and the smell of smoke lingered in the air. The parchment unfurled in my mind, each word a lament, each phrase an unfulfilled promise. As these echoes resonated, I felt encased in an invisible weight, a growing doubt settling heavily on my shoulders. What exactly had I left behind? The night was dense, the tents huddled together, as if sharing secrets, and the voices I had let go once again echoed, vibrating like unplayed strings. Even now, I could barely distinguish between what was real and what was just a product of my yearning. It was a palpable sadness, sharp and strange, as if the darkness itself entwined with my shadow, wanting to whisper truths we never dared to hear. I looked around and noticed forms hidden beneath the flickering firelight. They could have been animal hides or remnants of dreams I had left behind. I couldn't tell. The ground seemed to pulse beneath my feet, and with every step I felt the earth murmuring memories I would rather keep buried. Suddenly a crack broke my concentration. A branch breaking, perhaps. Or was it just the creature that always followed me, or the echo of something long gone? Each time my eyes closed in search of rest, fragments of memories surfaced. The feeling that everything was about to be revealed wrapped around me like a heavy, comforting cloak. Yet with a simple thought, that calm scattered into 1,000 pieces, blowing away like dry leaves in the wind. What had I promised on those dark nights? What did those promises mean if they remained trapped like echoes without a recipient? In the dim light, something called to me, a feeling I couldn't decipher. The weight of memory surrounded me like an invisible cage, with unresolved accounts of a life that couldn't decide to be complete. It was as if silence morphed into solitude, and I was merely rehearsing for a role that would never be performed. And the more I thought, the more suffocating the atmosphere became, as dense as the mist around me. Palpable, almost tangible, saturated with emotion and confusion. And there was the bell. A small bell I once thought lost beneath the mud. It was the only symbol that reminded me that promises existed to be fulfilled, but also to be broken. The sound of the bell always returned at the same hour, unraveling the thread of sanity, and I wondered if it was also part of this enigmatic tapestry of memories. Maybe everything I left behind is just an illusion, isn't it? I thought, listening in the distance to the echo of other promises I never managed to articulate. And so, lost in convoluted thoughts, I realized that this place was not just a camp, but a tapestry of stored memories. Each piece an untold story, each shadow an echo of unfulfilled promises. But what is truth if memory itself becomes tangled in the mist of time? I questioned myself, with a dry laugh in my words. There, on that night, where silence held its own secrets, the unspoken promises and reverberating echoes blended together. And when I closed my eyes again, just to listen, I realized that each heartbeat became a beat in the silent song of the camp. Promises, memories, and echoes all danced and intertwined, forming an endless cycle. In the end, the truth was not a closure, but a continuous return. That place still held the melody, even if we never knew how to finish it. I remember clearly, or at least I remember the illusion of it. There was a gate, not like the gates of fortresses, tall, iron, with hinges that scream. It was simpler than that. 2 stone pillars, covered in ancient moss on their sides, with a weathered wooden bar supporting a little bell dangling from a copper wire. Yes, a bell. Small, light, but with a sound so high and sweet that even from a distance it sent shivers down your spine. That was how we passed through. Everyone. Upon arrival, perhaps upon departure, or during some intermediate crossing we struggled to name. And then, one day, it was just gone. Just like that. The pillars were still there, standing tall, solemn, covered in lichens and tiny flowers that bloomed only at night. But between them, nothing. No wood, no bell, just fog. A thick vertical fog, like a living curtain, a space without answers. Some said it was the same place, that the gate was still there, just on the other side. Others claimed that the gate had been taken, not by hands, but by forgetfulness. There were those who tried to cross the fog. A boy, too young to carry that old sword, stepped in. He took 3 steps and vanished. We heard the bell ring just once very softly, and then silence. Days later, the wind brought back the scent of the broth he liked, but not him. Another person tried to mark the ground. He made trails with stones, with ropes, even with small mirrors, but everything disappeared as it passed through the fog, as if the void erased the traces, as if it swallowed the signs. The tailor would say that the gate was made of decisions, that it only existed when we knew where to go. And no one knows anymore, he whispered one night while mending a cloak that had never been worn. A woman, the one who spoke with the rain, camped before the void for 7 nights. She recited prayers, sang ancient names, played a flute made of bone. Nothing. On the 8th morning, she left. She said, "There's no longer another side. There's only what we forgot to seek." After that, she started walking in circles around the camp. She never stopped again. I ventured there myself one windless day. The fog wavered slightly. I reached out my hand. It felt cold, but not the cold of night, the cold of absence, as if crossing it meant leaving something behind, something that perhaps was me. One detail that always intrigued me: the shadows didn't cross the pillars. When the sun rose, they projected from the sides, as if the void refused projections, as if light, too, feared to cross. Some began to leave offerings there, smooth stones, ribbons, fragments of maps. Once, they left a journal. The next day, it returned to the camp, open to a new page. The gate was remembered too much. One theory suggested that the gate didn't disappear, that we were the ones who changed places, that we now inhabited a reflection, a fold in time, where there's no entry or exit, where everything simply remains. You know, traveler, sometimes I wonder if all of that really happened, or if the gate was just a metaphor that we all pretended to understand, a symbol of choice, a boundary between what we can bear to remember and what we prefer to leave behind. Today, as I find myself standing, unsure whether to move forward or turn back, I think of that space between the stones, the absence that breathes, and the sound of the little bell that, from time to time, I still hear in the background, faint like a whisper, made of bronze and longing. And I stand there, caught between 2 steps, waiting for something to be revealed. The wind whispered among the trees, not as a song, but as a confession. The fog wrapped around the night, like a heavy, familiar cloak. I remember sitting by the campfire, just like so many times before, and in a moment almost silent, a thought came to me, gliding through the air like a seed, waiting to germinate. I had already been there. It wasn't just days before, or weeks. It was long before, years perhaps, even before I knew what a camp was or had seen a drawn sword. The memory didn't manifest in images, but as a whirl of scents: the moss, the warmth of herbal tea, the damp leather of some forgotten cloak, a breath of wind carrying the same perfume from my childhood, or from a distant dream that danced between the boundaries of reality and memory. As I looked around, the tents seemed more than just simple shelters. They were accomplices. The footsteps that only went in one direction, the echo of a song everyone knew but never finished. Everything felt too precise to be mere chance, as if each detail had been placed by a loving hand, by someone who knew me intimately, or perhaps by myself in another time, lingering only in the shadows of what might have been. I felt an impulse. I stood up and walked among the uniforms hanging like shadows. The field where the battle never occurred looked at me, and the trunk near the largest tent gave a hollow sound at my touch, an echo of ancient footsteps. My footsteps? Or those of a self that had gotten lost somewhere? I passed the pillars where the gate once stood. The emptiness was palpable, a presence that could be felt, and the fog danced without knowing why. As I ran my hand along the cold surface of the stone, I felt a shiver, familiar, like a loss hiding in the shadows. The sensation was that by crossing, I was leaving something behind, something that maybe was me. And then I saw, not with my eyes, but with what awakens when perception closes. I saw myself younger, standing tall, with eyes full of expectation, arriving at the camp as everyone did, without the weight of questions, simply following the scents of iron and tea. I saw the white horse looking at me, always still and silent, its presence as strong as a promise. I saw the sitting man turn his face in the firelight, as if he knew each of us and was waiting for something. A word, a gesture, a return. The journal. Oh, the journal. I saw its pages turning by themselves, spilling words of forgotten memories. A whisper echoed in my mind. Come back. I understood that this place wasn't merely geography. It was a cycle. It was a spiral memory waiting to be filled. Perhaps we were all those who had been here before, in other lives, in other dream, in battles not fought that became echoes. And when that idea took shape within me, it didn't frighten me. On the contrary, it brought relief. I settled like someone who finds their childhood room again, feeling that the sound of rain on the roof is the same, no matter the time. You know, traveler, sometimes I wonder if all of this really happened, but in some moments, and those are the ones that weigh the most, it feels like I'm stuck in this cycle, ensnared in the webs of memory, always returning to this camp where love and pain intertwine with time. The campfire crackles, dry and damp at the same time. The embers dance slowly, like farewells that have no rush. And I let the words spill slowly, like old honey, like the last sip of tea that never cooled down, but never really warmed up either. And so, even if the fire burns less and my eyes slowly close, there will always be echoes of the whispered words on nights when the stars hesitated to shine. And this certainty remains. The horse, the sitting man, the journal, and the song. Ah, the song. Everything is still waiting for a note that never ends. The campfire still crackles, even if its eyes have already shut. The fog rose slowly, like a cloak touched by the first currents of a new day. This was something I felt more than I saw. The world around me began to glow, in a thin stream of light seeping through invisible cracks, bringing with it hope, a promise of everything I had yet to discover. The dew lay like an invitation on the grass, a refreshing coolness filling my soul, reviving not only my body but also the thoughts that seemed to rest in a deep silence. Ah, how I longed for this clean air. It carried the distant scent of something forgotten, mixed with notes of wood and rising whispers. It was as if all those echoes, those whispers that frequently intertwined in the shadows of my mind, were now transforming into a sweet and warm hymn. Each fragment of memory, characters sketched in the mist, faces fading like the darkening day, danced in the new light, as if they were no longer shadows but companions guiding. I found myself thinking that truth wasn't a destination, not a line drawn on a flat map. Instead, it unfolded like the dawn, interweaving with memories. The past, far from being a burden, became an ally, a bridge to what was yet to come. As I gazed at the horizon, something touched my being. I felt that force, an echo of voices past, seeming to reclaim their places in the interrupted narratives. What more could come next? The light in the darkness almost felt like an open door, a silent invitation to explore the horizons that still awaited revelation. And so, even with slow and weary steps, I realized that each move I made resonated like a fabric of possibilities, a flicker of the almost, where perhaps all the beauty of existence resided. There, I continued, a man marked by time, wearing the scars left from every battle fought, but now, at dawn, wrapped in a tender peace. And maybe, in that space between light and shadow, the doubts still echoing like nearly lost memories, like the name of a place that simply evaporated, like the fog at dawn. I thought of every lost laugh in the fields of memory, laughs that appeared in an instant and disappeared the next. It felt as if all of this were calling to me. The shadows began to stretch in the morning light. The feeling was one of return, a reunion, like meeting a friend after a long absence. And for a brief moment, I realized that everything was there, already here. I ran my fingers over a flower blooming among the grass, and I inhaled its scent, so familiar yet distant, as if it contained echoes of a time I almost remembered, but could never quite reach. My heart, weary but beating, understood what reason sometimes overlooked. Sometimes, when the breeze swept through the air, I could swear I heard a song rising from the depths of my memory. Was it the same song that whispered on forgotten nights? Once again it danced, like a thread tangled in my mind. And even with that, in the distance, a sound, a soft bell, perhaps ringing out freedom or announcing the arrival of something I still didn't know. There was something in the gentleness of that music resonating within me, inviting me to dance amid the fog of my thoughts. It was then that I realized that in my state of lethargy, something deep began to take shape. The perception that the journey didn't end there. With always tentative steps, my eyes focused on a horizon line that unfolded, and with that, certainty dissolved among the mists. A new light, a new atmosphere called. Deep down, I knew there was more to come. This journey, in all its non-linearity, opened before me like a book yearning for unspoken words. That was it after all. The beauty lay not in the end of the path, but in the crossing that perseveres through constant discoveries and losses. And the breeze wrapping around me whispered, carry on, always. No longer were these questions unanswered, but an invitation to the relentless search for what could still be, for what could emerge from the very heart of the human experience. And in this realization, I understood that perhaps the essence of living attaches less to the final destination and more to the fuel of discoveries. Smiling at the soft light, I let out a sigh, almost as if to say, just keep going. And so did my spirit. Because in the unexplored dawn, in the face of what I do not know, I dwell in the certainty that beauty folds over weariness. And that is the true journey. Because, the world reveals itself at every instant, and the future, like a new day, is already set, waiting for those courageous enough to explore it. The fog disperses like an unfinished mystery, and even now I feel that I left something, I cannot quite say what, in each of these places. But it doesn't have to be explicit. It doesn't have to be evident. This is what gives an intimate and confusing flavor to life. The campfire still crackles, even if its eyes have already closed. Good night, traveler.